What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving weekend. I know I did. I hung out with some friends that I haven't seen since the summer. Obviously spent time with family, had great food. But now it's back to business. Time to lock in after feeling refreshed and recharged from the weekend. We're going to go through waiver wire pickups for week 13. This is crunch time. I believe we have week 13, week 14, and then most playoffs start week 15, 16, 17. We got to lock in, cannot mess up on waivers, have to be on top of everything, get these last wins. They all count towards, getting a potential bye, squeaking in a 6 spot. It all matters. We have to be surgical. So today we're going to talk through 5 waiver wire pickups, all under 50% owned on ESPN. Let's not waste any more time. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical. My nitty bag.
And first up here, we have Gus Edwards, his first week back from injury, and Harbaugh essentially just hands him over the keys as the lead back in this offense. We had Kenyon Drake as sort of the lead back there the last 2 games where he had 24 carries, then he had 10 carries. And then this week, Harbaugh just completely, or whoever you want to say is calling the plays, Greg Roman, completely turned over the keys to Gus Edwards as the lead back in this offense. Now, it didn't show up huge in the box score. He only scored 9.2 points, but he had 16 carries, 52 yards, a touchdown, a fumble, which is really bad. But we now have 3 games of Gus Edwards this year. 11 carries, 16 carries, 16 carries. When he plays, he is the lead between the tackles guy, and that's a valuable role within this offense where you have Lamar Jackson freezing linebackers on read options. You have a lot of motion and weird stuff, Pat Ricard, and they're coming out of pistol and sort of throwing a lot of unorthodox concepts at people, which is why Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, I believe that was Lamar Jackson's breakout year. Or no, it might have been the year after. No, it was his breakout year. I believe it was 2020, where I think both guys were top 10 in yards per carry just off of that efficiency. Now, if we look at the snaps as well, he absolutely dominates there too. 36 plays out of, I want to say around 70. So he pretty much 50% of the snaps, half of the goal line work, majority of the early down stuff, majority of the short yardage stuff. Of course, third downs, he'll come off for Kenyon Drake, Justice Hill, whatever. But goal line, between the tackle stuff, 15 plus carries is pretty much where Gus Edwards will operate. Now, the only thing you have to sort of look at here is J.K. Dobbins is coming back soon. So he's a short-term start, Gus Edwards, until J.K. Dobbins is back in the mix, but we don't know when that's going to be. I know he was activated off of IR recently, but we still don't really know when that is going to come to fruition. Now, the next guy we'll talk about here is actually a twofer. Now, I say 5 players, but it's more like 3 players in 2 backfields because we have the San Francisco backfield right now, which is wide open. You have, honestly, a lot of people out there with Christian McCaffrey were panicking a little bit with Elijah Mitchell taking 10, 12, 15 carries, 18 carries I think he had in one game, really siphoning away a lot of work from Christian McCaffrey. He suffers an MCL sprain. He's out 6 to 8 weeks, likely rest of season. You don't have any Jeff Wilson there. So now you have these grinder carries where Elijah Mitchell was at 15 plus carries, 12 plus. I would say this role is probably going to be 8 to 12 carries per game. They don't want to just absolutely bang McCaffrey through the tackles. It seems like they have him on a little bit of a touch count. Now, by touch count, I don't mean 8 touches and you're out, but they don't want to give him 25, 30 touches, right? They probably want to limit it more in the 18 to 25 area. And what that brings in, especially with a team like this that runs the ball, plays defense, and they're going to run the ball 35 times a game, you're going to have a lot of carries left over, especially without a mobile quarterback with Jimmy Garoppolo in there. And this is where it gets tough. Jordan Mason and Ty Davis-Price are both probably worthy of waiver wire ads, but I prefer Ty Davis-Price, and this is why. Jordan Mason was active on Sunday. He took 5 carries for 25 yards. The reason I don't have him over TDP right now is, yes, Jordan Mason was inactive, or Ty Davis-Price was inactive. He had 0 carries, whatever. But we saw this in week 2. And what happens here is Jordan Mason is a special teams player. So on game days when you can only hold 3 running backs, you're going to go RB1 McCaffrey, RB2 Mitchell, RB3 Jordan Mason, because you'll use a 2-back rotation. Jordan Mason will just go on special teams. But now we're going to see Ty Davis Price active. We'll see Jordan Mason active. And I do think that Jordan Mason getting the nod on game days isn't because he's ahead of Ty Davis Price on the depth chart, but because he is a special teamer. We saw that work out in week 2. Elijah Mitchell gets hurt in week 1. And then Ty Davis Price comes in. Jordan Mason comes in. Jordan Mason had 0 carries in week 2 to Ty Davis Price's 14. Then, of course, Ty Davis Price gets a high ankle sprain in that game, and we haven't seen him since until just recently. Now, because it's Shanahan, he could say, you know what, I gave 14 carries to TDP early on, and Jordan Mason nothing, but I've changed my mind since then. I like what Jordan Mason gives us. So there's always that, possibility because Shanahan is so random, but I would bet that Ty Davis Price will be the one that gets leaned on, that gets the carries. I think Jordan Mason will probably revert back to his special teams role. So that's why I have Ty Davis Price ahead, but Jordan Mason's also a fine add. I think both guys just having a hand in this 49ers backfield, especially with a guy like McCaffrey where they don't want to give him 25 carries a game, it's a good role to have locked up off waivers. Now, we have one more backfield to get through, and it's the Steelers backfield, which is kind of weird to talk about because honestly, it's kind of sad. Najee was just starting to look good with Jalen Warren out, and all of these running backs are now hurt. You have Najee Harris hurt. You have You have Najee Harris hurt. You have Jalen Warren hurt. And this is a screenshot from 444's. I want to say it's like the training room. It's their injury report every week. I believe it's Adam Hutchinson, the guy who writes the article. But you have whatever their injury is. So that's like hamstring sprain for Warren. You have week 11 is the week that he sustained it. And then when he's going to return is week 14. So their top 2 running backs right now, Warren isn't scheduled to be back until week 14. Now, of course, these timetables are tentative. We don't have any concrete data, so I think that this is probably the best forecast of what it could look like. Warren looks like he'll miss minimum this week 13, and then Najee Harris looks like he's going to miss minimum week 13, week 14. So you have a spot here where week 13, you should be able to start either like Benny Snell or Anthony McFarland, who we'll talk about in a second. And then once Warren comes back, Warren will probably be a good start if Najee holds true that he won't be in through week 15, 16, 17. Now, when we talk about Benny Snell, this is sort of how the backfield broke down after the Najee injury. Of course, no Jalen Warren in there. Benny Snell, 68% of the snaps, 5 of 7 third and fourth down snaps, 3 out of 3 inside the 10. So he's getting all the valuable stuff. He's getting pass catching situations. He's getting goal line situations. He's getting about 70% of the snap. That's a good role. That's probably like a short-term RB3 Benny Snell. Like I said, when Jalen Warren comes back, they love Jalen Warren. I think that he'll be the main guy. But for this week, it seems like Benny Snell can be a nice short-term plug-and-play like RB3, but an RB2 on a hero RB team. He's playing the Falcons this week, who are giving up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So that's a good spot for him. And then again, if Jalen Warren does come back in week 14, you should get minimum 1 game from him with upside for week 14, week 15, week 16. And then if Najee's still hurt by like week 16, 17, 18, and, they still have a top 10 pick out of the playoffs, maybe they shut him down and you have Jalen Warren for like this 4-game stretch at the end of the year. Now, that's like the upside case scenario, but it's in there. So what I would say is if you need a short-term start, I think Benny Snell is great. If you have a bye locked up or you have a spot where you have an open spot on your bench that you kind of want to not set a trap, but kind of, plant the seed for something in the future, I think Warren is a nice long-term play. Now, again, these are all tentative. Najee Harris could be back in 2 weeks and this whole thing looks dumb, but that's just the information I have right now. Now, our 4th must-add player is going to be Treylon Burks. And we talked about him all year. We talked about him all offseason. We talked about him in Dynasty. We've talked about him on last Waiver Wire show. And it's clear that your league mates are not watching this channel. He is still only owned in 37.5% of ESPN leagues. Just absolutely egregious from these ESPN users. He now has back-to-back top 24 finishes, Treylon Burks, as the wide receiver 13 and the wide receiver 18 over the last 2 weeks. He's now over 2 yards per out run at 2.13 on the season, which is 14th among 75 wide receivers with 35 or more targets. And he joins Olave as the only rookie wide receivers with over a 2 yard per out run on 35 or more targets. He's also 20th in targets per out run at 22.3%, behind just London, Wilson, Olave. He is, I know we've talked about sort of the main three of like London, Wilson, Olave. Burks is knocking on that door, and I'd even put, you could talk me into putting Burks over like I'm not going to say over, but he's going to be in that tier where you have that clear tier, right, where London, Wilson, Olave has been killing it this year. Those guys are going to be studs forever. But Treylon Burks is in that same spot as like Christian Watson, George Pickens, just that next tier of guys that are really interesting, that are popping here and there, and are probably like wide receiver threes in fantasy. Now, when we zoom in and talk about redraft, of course, here, rookie wide receivers have monster upside down the stretch. I say this, I'm a broken record when it comes to saying that, but we saw it with Amon-Ra St. Brown last year. We saw it with Ayuk his rookie year. We saw it with Deebo Samuel his rookie year. A.J. Brown his rookie year. These guys blow up as the year goes on. They get more comfortable in their systems. Their routes go up. Their efficiency spikes. And it all starts sort of coming to fruition here. And Tannehill has been playing good football. The Titans are winning games. I know they just lost to the Bengals, but they're winning games. Tannehill is second in yards per attempt at 8.1. Only Tua, Mahomes, and Hurts are the other three quarterbacks with above an 8 yard per attempt. He's ninth in the NFL in expected points added and completion percentage over expected composite, which sounds like a crazy thing, but it's just a nerdy stat that just takes into account what are you giving over expected in terms of completion percentage, and then what are you adding to, your win percentage, how many points you're adding, what are you giving to the offense over what you're expected, and then how accurate are you versus what's expected. And he's looking really good. So that's amazing. Quarterback play is there. He's been efficient. And then on top of that, his routes are going up. This is the first time since coming back from injury that he passed Nick Westbrook in routes. He led the team in targets. At this point, I would call him like a low-end wide receiver 3 with massive, massive upside moving forward. Again, if he's on waivers, I really can't believe that. But if he's on waivers, you're going to have to pay a pretty hefty price for not listening last week. Now, our last must-add player here is Zonovan Knight, who's really fun. And he gets a fortunate opportunity here with Michael Carter. I believe he has an ankle sprain. They don't know if it's a high ankle sprain or what, but I saw done for the next 3 to 4 weeks, which opens up a huge spot in this backfield. And Zonovan Knight is really interesting. This is a guy who I actually liked pre-draft. I want to say there were a lot of sharp guys that liked him pre-draft. I don't want to speak out of turn here. I believe, now when it comes to these UDFA guys, fellas, you guys know I'm numbers oriented. I'm diving into all the numbers. When it comes to a UDFA, man, you can throw numbers out the window. It's honestly athleticism, and it's sort of, it maybe not tape, but just kind of like, can he look good in a game uniform, win over a coach's trust? It's just like a whole other criteria of things. I want to say Noah Hills from BDGE, someone who I respect a ton, especially when it comes to those UDFA guys, when I'm essentially blind to guys like Zonovan Knight. I throw them through the model. They come out as, oh, this guy's kind of garbage, didn't get drafted, whatever. I have no way of telling if that guy's good. I believe a lot of film guys out there love Zonovan Knight, and he's not obviously not a crazy good prospect as an undrafted free agent, but from my point of view, fine athleticism around like a 4.5, good size at, what is that, like 5'10", 210, or 5'11", 210, 21-year-old early declare. He probably should have stayed another year to get that draft stock up, but 21-year-old early declare, it's always good to see. And he also had 20-plus receptions in his final 2 seasons. So he's an all-purpose guy. He has some juice. He has some SEC pedigree. But he had like over 700 rushing yards all 3 years. Fun prospect. And the interesting part here is that it gets a little bit confusing because you have Carter hurt. You have James Robinson, who they traded for, but was a healthy scratch in this game, which means that they see him as their RB4 on the depth chart. And I want to make it known. I think there's going to be a lot of people out there that say James Robinson is probably just going to get elevated to the Michael Carter role. Maybe they signed him because of injury. It wasn't a healthy scratch. Maybe he was banged up a little bit. The thing is that they really like Zonovan Knight. Zonovan Knight, I had a tweet. I was like, Zonovan Knight is firmly in the mix here before the Michael Carter injury. Like right off the bat, I want to say on the first series, they got him involved. He had 5 touches to Michael Carter's 8 touches until Michael Carter got hurt. Like he was genuinely a big part of this offensive game plan, even with Michael Carter healthy. Like it wasn't Zonovan Knight, 0 touches, on the bench, chilling all game. Carter gets hurt and then Zonovan Knight gets thrown in. No, he was genuinely featured on this offense as a running back that they want to get involved before that injury. So that injury happens, and he completely assumes Michael Carter's role. So instead of Ty Johnson eating into that, Ty Johnson stayed as the pass-catching back, and Zonovan Knight had 69% of the snaps. He ended up with 14 carries for 69 yards, 3 catches for 34 yards through the air, which is really exciting. Again, I think that he leads this backfield, but it's a little bit tough here because you're going to get a spot where James Robinson will be back in the mix. Ty Johnson sort of caps the ceiling with the passing down stuff. This is an offense where, yes, Mike White looked great, but I don't know that they're going to be scoring a ton of points here moving forward. I will say, though, you do have the Mike White effect where he checked the ball down a ton to Michael Carter last season, so maybe you get some of that bump. I mean, 3 targets for a guy who wasn't out there on passing downs is pretty good for Zonovan Knight, so you do sort of have a trade-off there of a decent spot here. I don't think the upside is like league winner or anything with Zonovan Knight, but I think you could probably, pass some RB3 production from him that you could put into a hero RB or a zero RB lineup and get by. Now, that is going to do it for us today. When I'm done recording this and I'm done uploading this, I'm going to go write my waiver wire article on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. The link will be in the description. It'll be at the top of the comments below. Every single Tuesday, I sit down, write out a waiver wire Fab Report article where I go through 10 to 15 players at each position, and I go through exactly how much Fab I would bid on each player, and then kind of give you a couple nuggets on why the number is what it is, how I'd be playing that player, key stats, all of that good stuff. Now, of course, if you can't support there, like, subscribe, comments go a long, long way for the channel. As always, hope that your guys' teams are, looking good, sitting pretty in the playoffs. Let me know how you guys' teams are doing. I'm always curious. I know if you guys have buys locked up. I always love the story where it's like, man, I thought that fantasy before I subscribed here, and now I'm killing my home league. That's probably the best one. I know that there's some other ones who it's like, damn, bro. I checked out your channel, but shit has not gone my way today. Now, regardless, I'm rambling here. I appreciate you guys checking out the video. As always, subscribe, leave a like if you enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice. Channel, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper song, singer, suspended, subpoena from Mr. Meaner.